David Martinez stared at the medical report in his trembling hands, the words blurring through his tears. Tommy, his 8-year-old son, sat quietly in the hospital bed, his legs motionless beneath the thin white blanket. The accident had happened so fast. One moment, Tommy was riding his bike in their quiet suburban neighborhood. The next, he was lying unconscious on the asphalt after being struck by a distracted driver. "The spinal cord injury is complete, Doctor," Harrison had explained with practiced gentleness. "Tommy will need a wheelchair for the rest of his life." The words echoed in David's mind as he watched his son sleep. Sarah would have known what to do. She always had the right words, the perfect way to make everything seem manageable. But Sarah had been gone for 2 years now, taken by cancer when Tommy was just 6. David had thought he'd faced the worst life could throw at him. He was wrong. The insurance company's letter arrived 3 days later. Tommy would need a specialized pediatric wheelchair, one that could grow with him, support his developing spine, and give him the independence he deserved. The cost, $15,000. Insurance coverage, $3,000. David worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at the auto repair shop and evening security at the mall, but even with his modest savings, he was $8,000 short. He'd already mortgaged the house to pay for Sarah's medical bills. There were no relatives to turn to, no savings account to raid. That night, as Tommy slept fitfully in his temporary hospital wheelchair, David sat at their kitchen table and made a list of everything he owned that might have value. The list was heartbreakingly short. At the bottom, written in shaky handwriting, were 2 words that made his chest tighten. Sarah's ring. The wedding ring sat in its velvet box on David's nightstand, catching the morning light that filtered through their bedroom curtains. He'd kept it there since Sarah's funeral, unable to bring himself to put it away, but unable to bear wearing it either. Sometimes, in his darkest moments, he would hold it and remember their wedding day. How radiant Sarah had looked, how certain they'd both been that they had forever ahead of them. The ring was beautiful in its simplicity, a classic solitaire with a 1-carat diamond that had belonged to Sarah's grandmother. They'd been so young when they married, barely 22, and David had saved for months to buy it. Sarah had cried when he proposed, not because of the ring's beauty, but because she knew how much it had cost him. "It's not about the money," she'd whispered that night. "It's about what it represents." Now, 15 years later, David understood what she meant. The ring wasn't just jewelry. It was the physical embodiment of their love story, their promises, their dreams. It was the last tangible piece of Sarah he had left. Tommy wheeled himself into the bedroom, struggling with the borrowed hospital wheelchair that was too big for his small frame. "Dad, when can I get my real wheelchair? The one that fits?" David quickly closed the ring box and turned to face his son. Tommy's eyes were bright with hope, trusting that his father would somehow make everything right. The weight of that trust felt heavier than any burden David had ever carried. "Soon, buddy. Very soon." That afternoon, David called 3 jewelry stores. The estimates ranged from $8,000 to $10,000, exactly what he needed for Tommy's wheelchair. Moretti's pawn shop sat on the corner of 5th and Main, its neon sign flickering weakly in the afternoon sun. David had driven past it hundreds of times, but never imagined he'd one day walk through its doors. The bell chimed as he entered, and the musty smell of old electronics and forgotten treasures filled his nostrils. Behind the counter sat Vincent Moretti, a heavy-set man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked up from the watch he was examining and nodded at David. "Help you with something?" David's hand trembled as he pulled out the ring box. "I need to sell this." Vincent took the box and opened it carefully, his expression shifting as he saw the diamond. He pulled out a jeweler's loupe and examined the stone under a bright lamp, turning it slowly to catch the light. "Beautiful piece," Vincent said quietly. "Estate jewelry?" "My wife's wedding ring." The words came out as barely a whisper. Vincent looked up sharply, studying David's face. In 30 years of running the pawn shop, he'd seen desperate people sell family heirlooms, but something about this man's pain struck him differently. "Mind if I ask why you're selling it?" David found himself telling the whole story. Sarah's death, Tommy's accident, the wheelchair, the insurance denial. Vincent listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of sympathy. When David finished, Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "I can give you $9,000 for it." "That's more than fair market value." "Thank you," David said, his voice breaking. "That's exactly what I need." As Vincent prepared the paperwork, he watched David stare at the ring one last time. "You know," Vincent said carefully, "if circumstances change, if you ever want to buy it back, I'll hold on to it for a while." David nodded, unable to speak. He signed the papers, took the cash, and walked out of the shop feeling like he'd just sold a piece of his soul. The Pediatric Mobility Center buzzed with activity as David and Tommy arrived for the wheelchair fitting. Tommy's eyes were wide with excitement as he took in the showroom filled with colorful high-tech wheelchairs designed specifically for children. "This is the model we discussed," said Jennifer, their mobility specialist, wheeling over a sleek blue wheelchair. "It's fully adjustable as Tommy grows, has excellent maneuverability, and the cushioning system will provide proper spinal support." Tommy transferred from his borrowed wheelchair to the new one with Jennifer's help. The difference was immediately apparent. This chair fit him perfectly, responding to his movements with ease. For the first time since the accident, Tommy looked like himself again. "Dad, look how fast I can go," Tommy called out, wheeling around the showroom with a grin that hadn't graced his face in weeks. David watched his son navigate between displays, racing figure eights around mobility equipment, his laughter echoing through the space. The sound was worth every penny of Sarah's ring and more. "He's a natural," Jennifer observed. "Some kids take weeks to adjust, but Tommy's already mastering the basics." As they completed the paperwork, David felt a bittersweet mixture of joy and loss. Tommy was getting his independence back, his chance at a normal childhood, but the cost felt immeasurable. Every time David looked at his bare ring finger, he felt Sarah's absence like a physical ache. "The chair comes with a 2-year warranty," Jennifer explained, "and we offer free adjustments as he grows." Tommy wheeled over to them, his face flushed with excitement. "Dad, can we go show Mom?" The question hit David like a punch to the chest. They visited Sarah's grave every Sunday, and Tommy still talked to her as if she could hear him. David had never corrected him. "Of course, buddy. She'd love to see how well you're doing." Hillcrest Cemetery was peaceful in the early morning light, with dew still clinging to the grass and a gentle breeze rustling through the oak trees. David pushed Tommy's new wheelchair along the paved path toward Sarah's grave, the wheels moving silently over the smooth concrete. Sarah's headstone was simple but elegant. "Sarah Martinez, beloved wife and mother, 1985-2022, forever in our hearts." David had chosen those words carefully, wanting something that captured her essence without being overly sentimental. Tommy wheeled himself right up to the headstone and placed his small hand on the cool granite. "Hi, Mom. I got my new wheelchair. Want to see?" David watched as his son demonstrated the chair's features, explaining how the armrests adjusted and how smoothly it turned. Tommy's voice was animated, as if Sarah were sitting right there listening to every word. "Dad had to sell your ring to buy it," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "But don't be sad. He said you'd understand because you always wanted me to be happy." David's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't realized Tommy knew about the ring. "I saw the box on your dresser was empty," Tommy continued, still addressing the headstone. "And I heard you crying that night. But it's okay, Dad. Mom's not really in the ring anyway. She's in here." He pointed to his heart. David knelt beside the wheelchair, his vision blurring with tears. "How did you get so wise, buddy?" "Mom taught me. She used to say that love isn't something you can hold in your hands. It's something you carry in your heart forever." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own memories of Sarah. A cardinal landed on the headstone, its bright red feathers vivid against the gray granite. Sarah had always said cardinals were messengers from heaven. "She's proud of us," Tommy said with certainty. "I can feel it." David nodded, unable to speak. Maybe Tommy was right. Maybe Sarah's love wasn't contained in a piece of jewelry but lived on in the sacrifices they made for each other. 3 weeks after buying Tommy's wheelchair, David was under the hood of a 1995 Ford pickup when he heard the distinctive rumble of a Harley-Davidson pulling into the auto shop. He wiped his hands on his coveralls and emerged to see a massive man dismounting from a chrome-heavy motorcycle. The biker was imposing, easily 6'4" with a gray beard that reached his chest, arms covered in tattoos, and wearing a leather vest adorned with patches. But his eyes were kind as he approached David. "You David Martinez?" the man asked, his voice gravelly but gentle. "That's me. What can I do for you?" "Name's Jake Morrison. My bike's been making a weird noise in the engine. Heard you're the best mechanic in town." David spent the next hour diagnosing Jake's motorcycle, discovering a loose valve that was causing the unusual sound. As he worked, Jake watched with interest, asking intelligent questions about the repair process. "You know your way around engines," David observed. 30 years as a diesel mechanic before I retired," Jake replied. "But Harleys are different beasts. Prefer to leave them to experts." As David finished the repair, Jake noticed a photo taped to David's toolbox, a picture of Tommy in his new wheelchair, grinning at the camera. "That your boy?" "Yeah, that's Tommy. He's 8. Handsome kid. That's a nice wheelchair he's got there. Those specialized ones cost a fortune." David's hands stilled on his tools. "Yeah, they do." Something in David's tone made Jake look closer. "Everything okay?" David found himself opening up to this stranger, perhaps because Jake's presence was so calming. He told him about the accident, the insurance battle, and ultimately about selling Sarah's ring. Jake listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making sympathetic sounds. When David finished, Jake was quiet for a long moment. "That's love right there," Jake said finally. "Real love. Your wife would be proud." As Jake paid for the repair and prepared to leave, he turned back to David. "Mind if I ask where you sold the ring?" "Moretti's pawn shop on 5th Street. Why?" "Just curious. Thanks for the great work on the bike." Jake rode away, but something about the conversation stayed with David for the rest of the day. Jake Morrison wasn't just any biker. He was the president of the Iron Eagles Motorcycle Club, a brotherhood of riders who'd been together for over 20 years. That evening, he called an emergency meeting at their clubhouse, a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town. 23 members gathered around the worn wooden table where they'd made countless decisions over the years. These weren't the stereotypical bikers portrayed in movies. They were teachers, mechanics, veterans, small business owners, and retirees who shared a love of motorcycles and a commitment to helping their community. "Brothers," Jake began, "I met someone today who reminded me why we do what we do." He told them about David Martinez, the widowed father who'd sacrificed his most precious possession to help his disabled son. The room grew quiet as Jake described the man's quiet dignity, his obvious love for his boy, and the heartbreaking choice he'd had to make. "I want to help this family," Jake concluded, "but I can't do it alone." Marcus, the club's treasurer and a retired teacher, was the first to speak. "What did you have in mind?" "I'm thinking we buy back that ring. Give it back to him." "How much are we talking?" asked Tony, a veteran who ran a small construction company. "Probably around 9 or 10,000. I know it's a lot, but—" "I'm in for 500, Marcus interrupted. "Same here," said Tony. Around the table, every member pledged what they could. Some offered $100, others $500. Within 30 minutes, they'd raised over $8,000. "We're close," Jake said, "but we need more. And I want to do this right. Make it special for the kid, too." "What about the other chapters?" suggested Lisa, one of only 3 women in the club and a nurse at the local hospital. "The Iron Eagles have chapters in 6 states. If each member contributed even $50, Jake's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. I'll start making calls tonight." "And Jake," added Frank, a grizzled Vietnam veteran, "when we give him back that ring, we do it proper. Full colors, full brotherhood. Show that family what community really means." The room erupted in agreement. The Iron Eagles had found their next mission. Over the next week, Jake worked the phones like a man possessed. The Iron Eagles had chapters in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, and Colorado, with over 900 members combined. Each chapter president listened to David's story with growing interest and immediate commitment. "Count us in," said Red Johnson, president of the Dallas chapter. "We'll take up a collection at our next meeting." "Same here," echoed Maria Santos from the Denver chapter. "This is exactly the kind of thing we should be doing." But the story didn't stop with the Iron Eagles. Word spread through the interconnected network of motorcycle clubs across the region. The Lone Star Riders, the Desert Winds MC, the Thunder Road Brotherhood, clubs that normally kept to themselves were reaching out to contribute to a stranger's cause. Jake's phone rang constantly. Bikers he'd never met were calling to pledge money, to ask for David's address, to share their own stories of loss and sacrifice. The fund grew from $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000. "This is bigger than just buying back a ring," Jake told his wife, Carol, as he tallied the latest contributions. "This is about showing the world who we really are." Carol, who'd been married to Jake for 35 years and had watched him organize countless charity rides, smiled knowingly. "You bikers are all the same. Tough on the outside, marshmallows on the inside." "Don't let that get around," Jake grumbled, but he was smiling too. By Friday evening, Jake had commitments from over 400 bikers representing dozens of clubs. The plan was simple. They would converge on David's neighborhood on Sunday morning, present him with his wife's ring, and show Tommy what real brotherhood looked like. "This is going to be the biggest ride we've ever organized," Jake told Marcus as they finalized the details. "And the most important." Marcus nodded. "That little boy is going to remember this for the rest of his life." Neither man could have imagined just how right he was. Saturday morning found Jake standing in Moretti's pawn shop, the familiar bell chiming as he entered. Vincent Moretti looked up from his paperwork, recognizing the big biker who'd called the day before. "You're here about the Martinez ring?" "That's right. Is it still available?" Vincent reached under the counter and produced the velvet box. "I've been hoping someone would come for this. That man's story broke my heart." Jake opened the box and examined the ring. Even to his untrained eye, it was beautiful. The diamond caught the light and threw it back in brilliant sparkles. But more than its beauty, Jake could feel the love and history it represented. "He said he paid $9,000 for it?" "That's right, and that's exactly what I'll sell it back for. Not a penny more." Jake pulled out an envelope thick with cash. Contributions from bikers across 6 states. "There's $10,000 here. Keep the extra as a donation to your shop." Vincent's eyes widened. "That's very generous, but..." "No buts. You treated David fairly when he was desperate. That means something." As Vincent prepared the paperwork, he couldn't help but ask, "Mind if I ask what you're planning to do with this?" Jake's weathered face broke into a grin. "We're going to give it back to him tomorrow morning, and we're bringing some friends." "How many friends?" "About 900. Vincent nearly dropped the ring box. 900? Give or take. Bikers from all over the region are coming to meet David and Tommy. We want to show them what community looks like." Vincent shook his head in amazement. "In 40 years of business, I've never seen anything like this." Jake carefully tucked the ring box into his vest pocket. "Neither have we. But some things are worth doing right." As Jake prepared to leave, Vincent called out, "Tell David that his wife's ring is coming home where it belongs." I will. And Vincent, you might want to close the shop tomorrow morning and come watch. This is going to be something special. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, with a crisp autumn breeze that made it perfect riding weather. At 6 a.m., bikers began gathering at the Walmart parking lot on the outskirts of town, the designated meeting point for what would become the largest motorcycle convoy in the region's history. They came from all directions: Harleys, Indians, Triumphs, and custom bikes, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun. The riders were as diverse as their machines, men and women ranging from their 20s to their 70s, wearing the colors of dozens of different clubs but united in a common purpose. Jake stood on the bed of a pickup truck, addressing the growing crowd through a megaphone. Brothers and sisters, what we're doing today isn't just about returning a ring. It's about showing the world who we really are. We're not the stereotypes people see in movies. We're teachers and mechanics, nurses and veterans, parents and grandparents. We're a family. The crowd cheered, the sound of hundreds of voices mixing with the rumble of idling engines. David Martinez doesn't know we're coming, Jake continued. He's probably having a quiet Sunday morning with his son, maybe reading the paper, maybe visiting his wife's grave. In about an hour, we're going to change his life forever. Lisa, the nurse from Jake's chapter, had coordinated with the local police to ensure the convoy could move safely through town. 3 patrol cars would escort them, their officers as curious as anyone about this unprecedented gathering. Remember, Jake called out, we ride slow, we ride safe, and we ride with respect. This is about love, not showing off. At exactly 8 a.m., Jake fired up his Harley and pulled out of the parking lot. Behind him, like a river of chrome and leather, 900 motorcycles fell into formation. The sound was thunderous, a rolling wave of engine noise that could be heard for miles. Residents along the route came out of their houses to watch the procession, many pulling out phones to record the incredible sight. Children waved from front yards, and the bikers waved back, their tough exteriors softened by genuine smiles. David Martinez had no idea what was heading his way. David woke early that Sunday, as had become his habit since Sarah's death. The house was quiet, with Tommy still sleeping in his room down the hall. David made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper and trying not to look at his bare ring finger. The past few weeks had been an adjustment. Tommy was thriving with his new wheelchair, gaining confidence and independence every day. He'd even made friends with other kids in wheelchairs at his physical therapy sessions. But David still felt the absence of Sarah's ring like a phantom limb, reaching to touch it and finding nothing there. At 8:30, Tommy wheeled into the kitchen, his hair sticking up at odd angles and his pajamas wrinkled from sleep. "Morning, Dad. Can we have pancakes?" "Sure, buddy. The good ones or the frozen ones?" "The good ones. It's Sunday." David smiled. Sarah had started the tradition of Sunday morning pancakes from scratch, and David had continued it after her death. It was one of the small rituals that kept her memory alive in their daily lives. As David mixed the batter, Tommy positioned his wheelchair at the kitchen window that faced their front yard. "Dad, do you hear that?" David paused, listening. In the distance, he could hear what sounded like thunder, but the sky was clear. The sound was growing louder, more distinct, the unmistakable rumble of motorcycle engines. "Sounds like a lot of bikes," David said, returning to his pancakes. "Maybe there's a rally in town." Tommy pressed his face to the window. "Dad, I think they're coming this way." The sound was definitely getting closer now, and David could hear individual engines within the collective roar. He walked to the window and stood behind Tommy's wheelchair, both of them peering out at their quiet suburban street. "Wow," Tommy breathed. "That's a lot of motorcycles." David felt a strange flutter in his chest. The sound was so loud now that it seemed to be coming from all directions. He opened the front door and stepped onto the porch, Tommy wheeling out beside him. What they saw took their breath away. The first motorcycle rounded the corner onto Maple Street at exactly 9 a.m., followed by another, then another, until the entire street was filled with a slow-moving river of chrome and leather. The procession seemed endless, bikes stretching as far as the eye could see in both directions. David and Tommy stood on their front porch in stunned silence, watching as hundreds of motorcycles filled their quiet neighborhood. Neighbors emerged from their houses, equally amazed by the spectacle. Children ran to front yards, pointing and waving as the bikers slowly cruised past. But something strange was happening. Instead of continuing down the street, the motorcycles were stopping. The lead bike, a massive Harley-Davidson ridden by an imposing man with a gray beard, pulled into David's driveway. Behind him, other bikes began parking along the street, in driveways, on lawns, anywhere there was space. "Dad," Tommy whispered, his voice filled with awe, "I think they're here for us." David's heart was pounding as he watched the lead biker dismount and remove his helmet. The man was huge, easily 6'4", with arms covered in tattoos and wearing a leather vest adorned with patches. But when he looked up at David and Tommy, his eyes were kind. "Are you David Martinez?" the man called out. David found his voice. "Yes, sir, that's me." The biker smiled and began walking toward the porch. Behind him, hundreds of other riders were dismounting, creating a sea of leather and denim that filled the entire neighborhood. The sound of engines gradually died away, replaced by the murmur of voices and the creak of leather. "My name is Jake Morrison," the big man said as he approached the porch. "We're here because we heard about what you did for your son." David felt Tommy's hand slip into his. "I don't understand." Jake reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. David's breath caught in his throat as he recognized it immediately. "Sometimes," Jake said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet crowd, "the world needs to be reminded what real love looks like. What you did, selling your wife's ring to buy your son's wheelchair, that's the kind of love that changes everything." Jake held up the ring box so everyone could see it, his voice carrying across the crowd of bikers who had gathered in David's front yard and spilled out into the street. 900 bikers from 6 states contributed to buy this ring back, Jake announced. Teachers, mechanics, nurses, veterans, parents, grandparents, all of us united by the belief that love like yours should be honored, not punished. David's legs felt weak. He gripped the porch railing for support as the magnitude of what was happening began to sink in. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Jake replied, climbing the porch steps. "Just know that your story touched hearts across the entire region. When bikers heard about a father who sacrificed everything for his son, we knew we had to act." Tommy wheeled closer to Jake, his young face filled with wonder. "Are you all here because of my wheelchair?" Jake knelt down to Tommy's level, his massive frame somehow gentle as he addressed the boy. "We're here because your dad loves you so much that he gave up the most precious thing he owned to help you. That kind of love deserves to be celebrated." Around the yard, bikers were removing their helmets and sunglasses, revealing faces that defied every stereotype. There was Marcus, the retired teacher, standing next to Lisa, the hospital nurse. Tony, the construction worker, was talking quietly with Frank, the Vietnam veteran. These weren't the dangerous criminals that movies portrayed. They were ordinary people who happened to love motorcycles and believe in helping others. "We know we can't bring your wife back," Jake continued, standing and offering the ring box to David. "But we can make sure her memory stays with you where it belongs." David's hands shook as he took the box and opened it. Sarah's ring sparkled in the morning sunlight, as beautiful as the day he'd first placed it on her finger. Tears streamed down his face as he held the ring that he'd thought was lost forever. "How can I ever thank you?" David whispered. "By being the man you already are," Jake replied. "By loving your son the way you do. By showing the world what real strength looks like." As David slipped Sarah's ring onto his pinky finger, the only finger it would fit, the crowd of bikers erupted in cheers and applause. The sound echoed through the neighborhood, a celebration of love, sacrifice, and the power of community that transcended all boundaries. Tommy wheeled himself to the edge of the porch and raised his hands for quiet. The massive crowd gradually fell silent, all eyes on the small boy in the wheelchair. "My mom always said that angels come in all shapes and sizes," Tommy said, his young voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "I think she was right. Thank you for being our angels." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Tough bikers who'd seen combat, who'd faced life's hardest challenges, wiped tears from their faces as they listened to this brave little boy. Jake pulled out his phone and called Vincent at the pawn shop. "Vincent, it's Jake Morrison. We did it. The ring is back where it belongs." "Thank God." Vincent's voice crackled through the speaker. "I've been thinking about that family all week." Over the next hour, bikers took turns meeting David and Tommy, sharing their own stories of loss and triumph. Many left small gifts: toy motorcycles for Tommy, gift cards for groceries, offers of help with anything David might need. A fund was established to help with Tommy's ongoing medical expenses and future wheelchair needs. As the gathering began to wind down and bikers prepared to head home, Jake approached David one final time. "This doesn't end here," Jake said. "You're part of our family now. If you ever need anything at all, you call me." David nodded, still overwhelmed by the generosity he'd witnessed. "I will. And Jake?" Sarah would have loved this. She always believed in the goodness of people. "She raised a good son and married a good man," Jake replied. "That tells me everything I need to know about her." As 900 motorcycles slowly departed, their engines creating a thunderous farewell, David and Tommy remained on their porch, watching until the last bike disappeared around the corner. The neighborhood returned to its Sunday morning quiet, but nothing would ever be the same. David looked down at Sarah's ring on his finger, then at his son's smiling face, and realized that sometimes the darkest moments in life reveal the brightest light in humanity. Love, he understood now, was not just what you held on to. It was what you were willing to let go of and what others were willing to give back. The ring was home, but more importantly, so was hope.